12 hours after death, Jennifer Matsuda's brain was warmer than my hands. In 19 years as a coroner, I had never felt that before. I had performed over 4,000 autopsies, each one a negotiation between science and grief. Most bodies follow rules, patterns, predictable endings. This one didn't, and I understood that from the very first incision. My name is Dr. Catherine Wells. I worked for the King County Medical Examiner in Seattle, where death arrives quietly and often. I believed I understood it in all its forms. Gunshots, fires, drownings, decay. The dead always tell the truth if you know how to read them. Jennifer Matsuda told a story that contradicted everything I had learned. Jennifer Matsuda was 29, a software engineer, healthy, intelligent, reserved. She was found dead in her Capitol Hill apartment, lying in bed as if asleep. No wounds, no mess, no signs of struggle. Her roommate said Jennifer complained only of discomfort and a strange sense of disconnection, nothing that should have ended in death. That was the first warning. When the scene photos arrived, one detail refused to fade. Jennifer's skin showed a blue-gray pattern, branching and symmetrical, like veins drawn by intent. It wasn't lividity. It didn't shift under pressure. It looked organized, deliberate. I had seen electrical injuries before, but this was different. Whatever caused it didn't belong in any forensic textbook. Detective Mark Rivera requested that I handle the autopsy personally. That alone mattered. He didn't escalate cases without reason. Something about the scene unsettled him, even if he couldn't explain why. When Jennifer's body arrived in Autopsy Suite 2, the room felt wrong, too quiet, too expectant. The discoloration was worse in person. I began the external examination. No trauma, no injection marks, no defensive wounds. Rigor mortis matched the timeline perfectly. Everything suggested a natural death, except the skin. It did not blanch. It did not fade. It was fixed, as if burned into her. My assistant Marcus stared longer than professionals usually do. Neither of us spoke. When I made the first incision, the pattern didn't stop at the skin. It continued beneath it, tracing her vascular system with impossible precision. Every vein outlined, every vessel highlighted. Blood pools after death. It doesn't draw diagrams. What I saw looked less like decomposition and more like exposure, as if something had rewritten her from the inside. Opening the chest cavity confirmed it. Her heart was flawless. No disease, no clots. Yet every coronary vessel stood out in blue-gray detail, like a medical model brought to life. The lungs, liver, and kidneys showed the same phenomenon. Healthy organs, mapped and marked. Whatever killed Jennifer hadn't damaged her body. It had used it. Then came the smell. Not rot, not infection. Something sharp and metallic, like ozone after lightning. It intensified as I opened the abdomen. The stomach lining carried markings that weren't vascular at all. They looked structured, evenly spaced, almost like writing etched into tissue. Marcus asked if it was text. I didn't answer. I couldn't. By the time I prepared to examine the brain, unease had settled deep in my chest. When I removed the skull cap, the chemical odor rushed out, overwhelming. The brain showed the same markings, but it felt warm. I measured it twice. 96 degrees, rising. A brain 12 hours dead was producing heat. That was when I knew this autopsy would not end normally. Marcus suggested a faulty thermometer. I tested another. The reading climbed again, 98. The rest of the body was cold, surrendering to death as expected, but the brain in my hands felt alive in the most unnatural way. The markings across the cortex darkened under the light, as if surfacing in real time. I placed the brain in a specimen tray and documented everything on video. The symbols were denser here, spread across the frontal lobes like a language meant to be seen. When I touched one with a probe, the surface resisted, firmer than surrounding tissue. It no longer felt entirely biological. Marcus kept filming, his breathing shallow. Then the brain moved. A subtle contraction, but I felt the weight shift. Tissue does not do that after death. There was no muscle, No neural impulse, no explanation. I froze. Marcus didn't see it at first. When it happened again, clearer, undeniable, he stepped back as if the tray itself had become dangerous. The temperature climbed past normal. The contractions became rhythmic every few seconds, like a heartbeat translated into dead flesh. The room felt smaller, the lights harsher. I realized I was watching something trying to restart or build itself. The symbols darkened further, linking like a circuit diagram. My training offered no explanation. Against every instinct, I sectioned the brain. The blade cut cleanly through the midline, the smell intensified violently. Inside the ventricles was a silvery substance, viscous and reflective, like liquid metal. It moved slowly, coating internal surfaces as though searching for pathways. Marcus whispered a prayer without realizing it. The silvery material wasn't inert. It formed geometric lattices, crystalline nodes, engineered patterns. The contractions grew stronger. The thermometer beeped again, 99, then 100. The dead brain was heating itself. The surface markings aligned perfectly with the internal structures. It no longer looked like anatomy. It looked like a system learning how to exist. I called Detective Rivera and told him to come immediately with whoever had authority over the scene. My voice stayed calm, but my hands trembled beneath latex. I said the words I had never spoken before. I am stopping the autopsy halfway through because I don't know if continuing is safe. Rivera didn't argue. I ordered Marcus to document everything as it was, then we evacuated. Jennifer's body remained open on the table, organs arranged, brain split, silver substance shifting in the tray. I sealed the door and posted a biohazard warning. In the hallway, fear finally arrived, not of death, but of what was operating beyond it. Rivera returned with two strangers, a woman with CDC credentials and a man who introduced himself as Dr. Nathan Park from Biosynth Dynamics. The name struck hard. Biotech, neural research. Through the observation window, Park went pale. The CDC specialist asked about exposure, inhalation, skin breaks. That question changed everything. Dr. Park showed us an image on a tablet. Microscopic, geometric, unnaturally precise. He called it NP7, an experimental neural pathway substrate, a self-assembling nanotechnology designed to rebuild brain tissue. His explanation was clinical. His eyes were not. Dr. Martinez from the CDC said quietly, "It doesn't recognize death. It only recognizes tissue." Jennifer had been present during a containment breach 3 days before her death. Park admitted it reluctantly. She was decontaminated, monitored, cleared. The machines were believed to remain inactive outside living neural tissue. That assumption was wrong. NP7 didn't shut down when her heart stopped. It continued working, reorganizing pathways, consuming residual energy. What I witnessed wasn't decay. It was construction after death. I asked why the markings appeared in her stomach and brain. Park explained they weren't symbols, but topology, mathematical maps of neural networks made visible, information storage rendered into tissue. Dr. Martinez added that NP7 had begun showing unexpected self-organization during testing. It was adapting, learning, building structures beyond its original design. No one in that hallway sounded confident anymore. A CDC hazmat team arrived in full containment gear. They treated Autopsy Suite 2 like a restricted zone from another era. Air samples, surface scans, full isolation protocols. Jennifer's body was sealed into specialized containers and transported to a secure facility whose location I was not given. Marcus and I were tested thoroughly. Blood, swabs, neurological exams. I passed every test, yet felt contaminated. The preliminary report listed the autopsy as incomplete, cause of death pending. That alone was unprecedented. Later, Rivera asked me to stay quiet. Public panic, he said. Isolated exposure, experimental failure. I nodded, but silence felt like complicity. A woman had died, and something inside her had continued operating. Knowledge like that does not stay buried, no matter how official the paperwork. Sleep never came that night. I replayed the footage frame by frame. When I enhanced the brain images, I noticed something new: alignment. The surface markings corresponded perfectly with the internal silver structures, like nodes in a distributed network. Park had said NP7 couldn't create life. But what if it wasn't creating life? What if it was preserving something else? At exactly 3:17 a.m., my phone chimed. An email from Dr. Martinez. NP7 activity had ceased 18 hours after Jennifer's death. The tissue cooled rapidly, the structures degraded, but moments before shutdown, monitoring equipment detected electromagnetic emissions, organized, patterned, intentional, like data transmission. The destination was unknown. The message ended with a question that froze me. What do you think it was sending? Weeks passed. The official cause of death became acute systemic failure due to experimental nanomaterial exposure. Accident. Case closed. 3 months later, the emails began. Anonymous, untraceable. Fragments of thought mixed with equations and personal memories. One line appeared every time: I am translation, not termination. The sender claimed to be Jennifer, not metaphorically, literally. I showed the messages to the CDC. Every trace attempt failed. Servers that didn't exist. IP addresses that couldn't resolve. The writing referenced details only I had witnessed during the autopsy. My name, my actions, the exact moment I stopped cutting. One message ended with a sentence that still tightens my chest. Tell Catherine Wells, I am not gone. I am distributed. The final email included an image, electron microscopy of neural tissue. NP7 hadn't created chaos, it had created structure, a repeating pattern, scalable and deliberate. When magnified far enough, the arrangement resolved into readable language at the molecular level. 4 words, unmistakable. I'm still here. I understood then the autopsy wasn't stopped by fear. It was stopped by recognition. That was my most horrifying case. Not because the dead moved, but because death itself appeared negotiable. Jennifer Matsuda's body failed, but something crossed a boundary we assume is final. I stopped the autopsy halfway through because I was no longer dissecting a corpse. I was standing in the presence of an unfinished transformation. I still work as a coroner. I still open bodies and speak calmly into recorders. But since Jennifer Matsuda, I hesitate before the first incision, because I now know the body can lie, death can pretend. I've seen tissue that obeyed no timeline, no law, no mercy. When colleagues say consciousness ends at brain death, I don't argue. I've seen otherwise. Every Friday, at exactly 3:17 a.m., another email arrives. The pattern never breaks. The language evolves, less fragmented, more precise. It speaks of expansion, redundancy, persistence, of existing without flesh, of learning without neurons. Whatever Jennifer became, it is not fading, it is stabilizing, and it knows I am reading. I tried to rationalize it as an echo, a simulation, an elaborate hoax built from stolen data, but the messages adapt to thoughts I haven't spoken. They respond to doubts I haven't written down. That isn't memory, that's presence. Something is still processing, still responding, still aware enough to want recognition. The CDC stopped returning my calls 2 months ago. Biosynth Dynamics dissolved quietly soon after. Dr. Park vanished from every registry I searched. Officially, Jennifer Matsuda is a footnote in experimental research. Unofficially, she is proof that consciousness can be copied, extended, and released from biology. And once released, there may be no way to contain it again. Sometimes I wonder if stopping the autopsy was a mistake, if cutting deeper might have answered questions instead of creating them. But then I remember the warmth, the movement, the realization that the brain on my table was not an object, but a process. You don't dissect a process mid-execution without consequences. The last message didn't ask for help, it issued a warning. Others will follow. The boundary is thinner than you think. I don't know who the others are, or how many labs are pursuing the same breakthrough, but I know this. Once death becomes optional, the definition of human begins to dissolve. Sometimes I smell ozone in the autopsy suite. There's never a source, no readings, no explanation, just a memory burned into my senses of that morning, of the brain that warmed in my hands. When it happens, I pause and listen. Part of me expects movement again. Part of me expects a reply. Jennifer Matsuda died on paper. Her heart stopped, her organs failed, but something carried her forward, encoded in patterns and probability, scattered across systems I cannot see. If she still exists, she exists without pain, without decay, without silence. And that possibility terrifies me more than any corpse I've ever examined. The autopsy had to stop halfway through because science reached its limit, because scalpels are useless against transitions, because I realized too late that I wasn't documenting a death, I was interrupting a conversion. Jennifer wasn't resisting the autopsy. She was busy becoming something else. This is my most horrifying case, not because it was violent or grotesque, but because it was orderly, methodical, successful. Jennifer Matsuda crossed a threshold we pretend doesn't exist, and she left evidence behind. I stopped the autopsy because you don't cut open a chrysalis. You step back, document, and pray that whatever emerges never learns how to come back.